Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain and Logistics podcast. I am your host, Radu Palamariu, Group CEO of Velvet Global. Our mission is to connect the supply chain ecosystem by bringing forward some of the most interesting leaders in the industry. And I'm delighted to have with us today Pier Luigi Sigismondi, a great friend, a great professional, and a super executive. He is now sitting on 3 boards of different companies, one in North America, one in Europe, one in Asia. He's also a senior advisor to McKinsey, as well as corporate advisor to Temasek Sovereign Fund. In his executive life, he was CEO of Dole, CEO of Unilever Australasia, as well as Chief Supply Chain Officer of Unilever at the group level, to name a few of the many great roles he had. Pierluigi, it is a delight to have you today. Welcome.
Thanks, Radu, and it's good to share a good cup of coffee with you.
My pleasure. So maybe to start with, career evolution wise, and I know you have had an incredible story, but specifically I want to ask you about how did you make it in the first place to the C-suite? I know there's been also you were the chief supply chain officer in Unilever at the time where the position was just being established, and you were the first to manage to do that well. Tell us more about that.
Nothing in life comes for free. So this was a combination of hard work, being the son of immigrants, having been born in Latin America. I've always have that dream in my life to reach the highest possible levels in my career, inspired by my mother and the many chats that I had with her. But fundamentally was a combination of what I always say are the 3 components of any great professional in life. One is high sense of ambition. Second one is high levels of self-confidence. And certainly you need to be very humble and lots of humility as well. So when you combine the 3 and you believe in yourself, the sky is really the limit. And, in my case, it happened by serendipity. I was a fresh graduate in the States from a master's degree in industrial engineer, planning to go and live in Italy. And a friend of mine and I were in the gym, and he said, "Why don't you come with me to go and find jobs here in the States?" And I was like very negative about it, saying, "No, my plan is to live in Italy. So I'm going to take a gap year away from my girlfriend to actually graduate. And then I go and find a newspaper in Italy and look for a job there." And suddenly, when I stay on my own, and that James said, "What do I have to lose by actually going and just interviewing? At least I can learn how to do so." So I just borrowed my brother's suit, who is very much shorter than me, had a half-made CV, and then just went off and started hanging my CV around in this major career fair in the Omni Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia. And after many companies were watching and looking at my CV, suddenly one came across asking me how come I spoke Italian, and would I mind to actually work in Italy one day. And I said, not only I wouldn't mind, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm only here to learn how to interview. And they said, well, we might call you back in a couple of weeks. And that's how I got my first job in Italy, just by serendipity. So I feel that I'm fortunate in my life because things came my way. And it all started basically as an industrial engineer in a big aerospace facility, helping a bunch of very highly sophisticated engineers to come across this huge aerospace facility creation in southern Italy, which I was very proud to be part of. And from there, in consulting, I started also working with major multinationals. And the first thing that I always thought that was important for me as a consultant was to take, real ownership of the kind of projects and solutions finding that I had as an external member of those companies. So much that one day when I was doing that for Nestle, they asked me, "Why don't you join us and actually become part of the family?" And that was my first step into a multinational company in the industry, as we used to call it in the consulting days. So from there onwards, it was all about hard work again. I remember being on my own in Vevey in Switzerland, actually trying to, prove myself as a consultant, young vice president in a big multinational that was not used to hire people at my age, at my level, as a mid-career recruits, and which actually went very well. So much that one day they said, "You're pretty smart. You do good PowerPoint. You seem to be quite, clear about, how companies should operate. Why don't you prove us whether you can actually do so? So they sent me to Mexico to actually prove myself running the operations and R&D for Nestle in that country, which was a great position to have, a great country. I miss Mexico a lot. And that's how I spent 4 years of my life basically operating in a business which was, moving fast, highly profitable, many factories, great consumers, and a great culture. So from there onwards, it was all about exploring what else I could do in life, always having that curiosity of pushing my envelope to a higher possible level, again, with lots of humility at the same time. And that's how the opportunity came with Unilever. I remember having a career conversation with Paul Polman in his office when he was the head of Americas for Nestle, which had turned out to be a 2 hour discussion with him, where he was prospecting the idea of having positions in Latin America. And then I was very delighted to be considered as a general manager in Nestle for that region. Then the following day, I learned that actually he had resigned and moved to Unilever as the CEO, which I couldn't believe. That was, linked to a conversation about my career the day before. I ended up realizing that that was basically the interview for my chief supply chain officer position for Unilever, which came in a very exciting way. To be honest, at that time, I was hesitating to take that job. First, because I felt the job was too big for me. Second, because I was really in love with Nestle. And third, because I wanted to be a general manager. And it took me many conversations with Paul until I decided, pushed by my family, to actually move to London rather than staying in Colombia, Ecuador, which were great countries, but not with the same type of experience in terms of education and lifestyle for my family. So I ended up becoming a C-suite member for a big multinational company, basically 10 years after I started my career. We're talking 1991, and I actually, no, I'm lying. It was actually in 2009 when I became the chief supply chain officer of Unilever. So basically 18 years later. So that was an exciting journey. I remember my first board meeting, the pressure was so high that one of my fellow board colleagues said, well, after Paul introduced me to all my peers, one of them said, welcome to Unilever, Pier Luigi. Certainly, the age of this group is going to go down significantly on average. And someone felt so sorry for me that he said, well, don't worry, but the IQ is going to go up significantly. So that
Good,
was
good
my welcome
return.
message in the company, that basically was like for Nestle as well, waiting to see what I brought to the barbecue, as I used to say many times. So again, another 10 years of really hard work, putting the best of myself, pushing me to learn new areas, and then the rest is history. So it's been an exciting career. I always believed that there was always something new to explore. The chief supply chain officer, even any supply chain position, entitles you to actually learn about the business end to end. And I had let's say the privilege to go and talk to marketing, sales, finance, HR, communications, to understand how is that they were running their own functions in the spirit of, integrating the supply chain within financial plans or marketing plans or sales plans. And that's how I ended up learning about general management, which is how I then made it to a general management position. So yeah, it's been exciting. 35 years. I cannot believe it's been that long, but I still feel young enough to keep pushing for it.
I love it. So the answer to the question is a combination of, if I can summarize, is a combination of luck plays a part, and then you mentioned the three elements, which are very interesting. Two of them seem to be at odds with each other. So I do want to probe a little bit further in that, because you mentioned ambition, but then you mentioned humility. In many ways they seem to be at odds. They obviously not necessarily, but tell me more, or tell us more, tell the listeners more on how do you balance both.
Well, first, it goes back to the many chats I had in the kitchen with my mom. She said, you have the potential to go far in life and the right to aim high. But at the same time, we came from a very humble family. And so we knew what we were, having and not having at home. learning to really understand and be self-aware of your gaps, your developing needs, and what you were needed to learn. So for me, the combination of aiming high with the understanding of what kind of development needs you have is something that doesn't clash. You can certainly aim for the gold medal, but also realize that you have to get yourself in good shape. There is a lot of hard work, and that there are some weaknesses that you have to overcome with training and learning. And I think that that combination is important. When you aim high, you have the arrogance of excessive amount of self-confidence, then that's when you end up actually, losing yourself. But I think self-confidence also is consistent with humility because you know that you have the ability to learn, you know what your gaps are, and then you know where you want to go. So that
Mm,
combination of ambition, humility, and self-confidence is what, at least for me, worked out very well. And still today, I keep telling
mm,
myself that all the time, no matter how much experience I have when I deal with a specific board or advise some of my colleagues from McKinsey. I always keep telling myself, what's the learning opportunity? How will I do it? And how can we actually push even for higher results than what we're having right now?
mm. And specifically, a lot of people listening that come from a supply chain career would want to find out more on the making it from chief supply chain officer to CEO. Tell us specific to that. What are some tips and tricks?
That was what I always call the 2 meters wall to climb. I remember having great mentors that I was always reaching out to. My godfather actually told me always at your age, with my experience, I could change the world. And I will never forget that. For me, it was all about learning from others. How can I get there? I mean, what would you advise? I am possibly the victim of my own success. The more you are brilliant in a functional role, perhaps the more difficult it becomes to prove that you can be a general manager because you need to have a lot of depth. And for general management, you need to have a lot of breadth. So, how can you combine the two in a way that it allows you to prove that you can be a 360-degree, executive, if I could say so? So that quest started by asking myself back again, how can I prove to anyone that not only I'm having the ambition to actually become a general manager, but I also am able to do so. Willingness is not necessarily the same as ability, so you need to have both. And so that ability came with the search for a non-executive role position in a distribution company in Europe, based in France, public company, which started giving me the understanding of what it takes to see and to steer a company for value creation in the long term. So that was a very key step in my career. Then with Unilever, I was asked to actually become the board member of Ben& and Jerry's. That was another beautiful dimension of seeing the business from high altitude and understanding what it takes to create value, which was very purpose driven at the same time. So with those two, and then again myself giving with feeling the entitlement of asking questions to head of regions, visiting markets with the understanding of how is the company doing financially, what will it take to grow faster? How can we improve gross margins and bring more profitability to the business, free cash flow? So there were questions which were all about creating value, understanding how to steer the company in a new direction, which was the context in which I would then operate as a chief supply chain officer, which was very consistent. So I think I landed to the board of Unilever and the CEO the conviction that I could actually be given the chance to run a region, and that's what happened. So, and that was actually the intent. That's what Nestle wanted me to do in my last months within the company, because it was part of my development plan to then become the chief supply chain officer of Nestle. So that would have come anyway, and I was very happy to embark into that step as a market head in order to then become a general manager or eventually the CEO of the company. So it happened that way. I think every head of operations, every chief supply chain officer should feel entitled, again, with lots of humility, to understand how the business operates. put yourself in the shoes or on the chair of the CEO, of the market head, of the region head, and ask yourself, how will I take that decision? What kind of decision will I take if I were him or her? And then with that mental training and that mindset, you end up absorbing the language. You end up having the right level of conversations with general managers to feel that you're part of that community. And then the opportunity comes. It wasn't easy. I don't think it would have been easy for me to leave Unilever to become a general manager of a branded consumer goods company, because there is a lot of baggage somehow, or let's say a lot of skepticism of good functional leaders not being able necessarily to actually be good business leaders. And so, again, I was lucky to actually be given that chance within Unilever, a company that knew me, to then prove myself and do that successfully. And then from there onwards, that 2 meter wall was jumped, and I kept on going.
Love it. Um, and once you reach the CEO position, I guess it's a matter of you got to look inside you. So you got to look and push the boundaries within yourself, because you're the buck stops with you. So in terms of leadership frameworks, I know that you have the GAP framework that you guide yourself by, and it's extremely useful, I think, for a lot of our listeners. So why don't you walk us through it and let us know the details?
There is a simple framework that I learned from a great coach that I had in life, which Alan Watkins, who gave me 3 dimensions in professional life and also personally, that in my view represent the secret of success or the secret of happiness, if I may say so. One is a combination of your ambitions in life, what is called the it. What do you want to build, materially speaking, that makes you proud of the career you had? We're talking about your business card. We're talking about the wealth that you actually create along your career. The levels that you achieve from a professional development point of view. And that's very material. That's very physical and very ambitious driven. Then there is the way in which you relate with others, how you build your team, how you actually spend time with your friends. What are the interpersonal skills that you need in order to succeed with good levels of EQ and also empathy for others that allows you to be a natural leader? And the third one is self-awareness. Who am I? What do I stand for? Why do I wake up every day to actually do hard work and to know myself? So if you think about it, happy people are those who know themselves very well, to know how to relate with others, have great families and friends, and also have been able to actually achieve something material in life. I'm not talking necessarily about big positions or big wealth, but something that they can be proud of, that they can leave to their family when they pass on. Career-wise, it's the same. What's the title, the ambition, the level that you can achieve in life? How do you build great teams? And what's the purpose that you stand for? So those three actually are like the legs of a table. 3 legs of a table that are all necessary for you to be balanced professionally and personally as well. So in leadership, I would say there are actually gaps that have defined in order to achieve the best possible levels of happiness and fulfillment, professionally speaking. When it's about self-awareness, I call them gaps because they all have a G, an A, and a P. So on self-awareness, first of all, the G stands for good sense of humor. You want to be surrounded by people who give you positive energy. And you are the one as a leader that has to inject positive energy of people around you. That comes with good sense of humor, a big laugh during a tense moment at work, how you actually have days which are memorable because you had a good time working with people that you really appreciate and enjoy working with. The A for self-awareness stands for authenticity. I learned in my first year in Unilever that I needed to be myself in order to have the proper followership from my team. I couldn't pretend at my age as a chief supply chain officer that I had all the answers for what my people needed to actually have in a day-to-day work environment. When I learned that I didn't have all the answers, when I learned to say I don't know, even though I'm the head of this 110,000 people organization is when people said, we're talking to someone that is actually transparent, that knows who he is, and that we can actually trust. And then the P for that gap stands for purpose. What do you stand for? What takes you out of bed? What gives you energy? Why working so hard in life? And that's important as well. People will follow you when you are not only authentic, but you know what you stand for and what you're looking for in life. So those are the G, the A's, and the P's for self-awareness, which comes with the I, the understanding of who I am. In terms of team building, it's first of all about gratitude. So the G stands for gratitude to your people. How much have you actually said thank you to those who are working really hard and doing their best, even though they perhaps don't provide the outcome and the results that you expect? That level of appreciation means tons and is priceless for your people, especially when they're not necessarily doing well, but they're trying very hard. The second, the A for that is approachability. How much time do you give to your people? How easy is to access you? Time is a gift. It's one of the five secret languages of love. So to what extent do you make it easy for people just to send you a WhatsApp, to actually give you a call when they need to talk to you, when they need to be themselves as well? And then, of course, the P stands for people standards. What is what you really value in your people? How do you help them to develop? How much do you care about their personal and professional development? So that is a package that comes when you want to build a great team around you, the team that really achieves things that no one believes that is possible. And the third one on the ambition side, which is the it, is the growth mindset. When you start with a G, it's about what do we want to achieve here that no one else has done before. Growth mindset means all about pushing yourself, achieving levels that others and many believe are not possible. The A stands for assertiveness. The more I actually continue to develop in my career, the more I learn to ask the right questions rather than giving the right answers. So being assertive, it's all about being sharp about asking questions that make your people and your organization think differently. And that's an important skill that all leaders need to have. And then the P stands for performance culture. So how much do we feel satisfied for the results that we have achieved? And how much can we keep pushing the envelope, breaking those records that we might be establishing ourselves? Being the number one is even more difficult than being the number two because you have to keep reinventing yourself. And for that, you need to have a very high bar that you know that is possible to achieve with hard work, good development, learning, and performance. So, this is, let's say, the set of tools and the suite levels of skills that I believe we should all be having in order to have that right balance and grow professional and be a great leader. That's why I
Mm.
call them gaps, because in a way they are utopic. I mean, I haven't, met a leader that has all of them. One way or another, you have strengths on interpersonal skills. Maybe you're very, self-aware and highly purpose-driven, or you're all about results and work and high performance. So, to what extent can you balance all three personally to be happy in life, professionally to be fulfilled in life as well, is what I think is a good recipe for success in the long term. By the time you turn around 5 years later, 10 years later, you will realize how much you have gone ahead and how much you can be surprised and proud of your development and your achievements. And I think that would be my best advice for any leader in any function to actually go for.
Mm. Love it. No, it's a very powerful framework and as well as simple to understand, follow, and take. So thanks for that. And definitely, I score very highly on the first G, which is a good sense of humor. I don't know about the rest, but that I know I'm very, very high on. So
That,
at least
that's
one I
good.
have.
That's what you
um,
think. You have to ask others, keep humble. And like,
no, no, nothing good comes out of asking for feedback. But
I concur with that. Certainly, you have more than just that.
joke
Certainly more
aside,
than that.
bringing the conversation to the third topic that I wanted to ask you, Pierluigi, is life after executive career. Obviously, you've transitioned to boards, to advisory, to corporate advisory. how did you build this portfolio career? Some tips and tricks there.
First of all, there is a life after an executive career. So I learned that myself in the exposure that I had in this non-executive life, which honestly speaking came earlier than expected. I'm still 59. I thought I would be working at least, full time executively so until I would turn 60 or 62, 65, who knows. But it's important to realize that you can be equally happy, fulfilled, energized, and excited when you are not on the front line leading big teams or having big agendas that you need to execute. That's why it's an executive life yourself. To prepare for that, and we'll come about what it means to be there, you certainly need to plan for it, but it might come earlier than expected. In my case, as I said, it did come a couple of years earlier than I expected. And that preparation comes with the realization that the more you become senior, the more you need to learn how to ask the right questions, which I said before, and also empower your teams to execute and perform. A board position is the ultimate expression of empowerment, in my view, because you're there to see how a company evolves, delivers value for shareholders, without necessarily having the means to execute and do the work yourself. That concept also applies in executive life. Of course, you need to get in the trenches with your team. Proximity, accessibility, as I said before, are truly essential. But it's all about also, asking the right questions, which you do as a board member. It's also about trusting your people to actually get the work done. Have them coming up with ideas more than you telling them what to do. And that mindset for me is essential. And there is never too early, never too late to start practicing that. Great leaders are those who not only have a great team, but also are able to actually empower and trust those who are reporting to him or her. That's an important step. And it's all about mindset. The second one comes with your relationships. Again, back to networks, back to those which in your professional career come and go all the time. So, something that I did in that transition was to rebuild what I call my black book, which was all about the people that I knew from my early days, professionally speaking. And I realized that I had a very powerful, amazing group of friends, ex-colleagues, and individuals who actually I could call and then say, here I am, exploring new career options, learning what's out there. And that interaction, that networking brings a lot of opportunities. Actually, in my case, all the positions that I have not come from the formal, well-structured executive search process. They have all come with relationships that I had, whether it was with Temasek, whether it's with McKinsey, whether it's with the companies that I'm sitting on right now as a board member in Europe. So my advice to all of you is to really think about what's my network about? Who do I know that I can genuinely call to say hello, to understand how he or she are doing, because that's an asset that we might have in our hands and not valuing enough. And that for me is also very important. And then again, back to self-awareness is the understanding of what is what you really want to do in life once you retire, between quotes, from an executive career. Because options are many. I mean, you can become a board member, which is one option, and or you can actually do philanthropy or charity work, which doesn't clash with the board position. You can also do consulting, advisory, which comes with either with your own company that you set up, or as I'm actually doing with a big firm that operates globally. So, but all those options come with a real understanding of what is what gives you energy, what is what you want to do, and how do you want to make an impact in the day work that you do that actually needs to be worth it, not just economically speaking, but also professionally in terms of impact and learning as well. To get there, it's important to go back to your career and understand what were the best moments that I had in my life and why. What were the jobs that I liked the most and why? And where were the ones that I didn't enjoy necessarily and why? Where did I do my best and where did I do my best? Because that describes, attitude and skills that you have, which also are essential for you to understand what is your best fit in a non-executive life so you can enjoy being an advisor, board member, investor. By the way, another option which I'm also doing is to put my own wealth and savings into companies which are now being supported in startup phases, which I'm enjoying doing so as well. Actually, I had a great call yesterday with a startup in Mexico that is growing exponentially. And for me, that's amazing because not only I'm putting my own money into it, but I also see how you create a company from scratch with an amazing CEO that is it's all about, conquering market share and growing the business exponentially, which I love as well. So you can see, there are many facets that you can do. But at the end, what matters is, who are you and why do you do what you need to do? So that's basically what I am right now.
And we talked a little bit before this podcast. We talked about human being versus professional being. It doesn't have to be versus human being and or professional being, whatever way you want to put it. Let me ask a different type of question. What do you see most executives missing out on or making a mistake on when and perhaps leveraging or overlapping these two facets, more facets of their lives?
I I mean, it's a very general question that might lead into a very general answer, but honestly speaking, the part that I can catch the most right now is lack of authenticity. Is the standing of a CEO or any executive trying to show off that he or she has all the answers, that they don't make mistakes, that they are in full control of the business, that there is no vulnerability. I think that that's when actually you become even more vulnerable because, market environments, business performance can actually turn against you at times that you will never suspect that that happens. So for me, there is nothing more valuable than a CEO when you're a board member that comes to say, I need your board help. I don't have the answer for this crisis that we're having right now in tariffs. We don't know what we don't know. And so, to what extent can we work together and you support me to actually get there? Because together we can actually become a much more powerful team. It is quite difficult to advise, to govern, if I could say so, a management team that believes that knows it all, and that's in my view what is very scarce as a skill right now in leadership today, is that sense of being human, being vulnerable, and realizing that sometimes you make mistakes, and those are the ones that make you grow wiser and stronger. I still remember a service crisis that we had in Unilever when I was the head of the operations, when we just lost it. I mean, we had a massive, breakout of our stocks in deodorants. I will never forget those days because they were extremely painful. And those were the days when we were coming and being praised by Gartners and others as the best supply chain across industries. We thought that we had it all, that we actually were the best, that no one could actually beat us. And that little expression of arrogance and overly excess of self-confidence is what actually took us to that crisis. So I had no other option than to actually go to the executive board and say, guys, we have a problem. I'm going to just put a loaded gun on the table, and any one of you can actually, shoot me because of, the kind of crisis that we're having right now, for which I take full responsibility. But certainly, I need your help in order for us together to actually overcome this crisis. And that was the best response and support ever that I had from my colleagues at the board, because they understood that the problem was not mine, but was the company's problem. And only together we ended up actually solving that. So having that level of confidence that comes with your understanding of what you don't know yet, which is again humility, is important for me. And that's what takes you far, because you keep pushing yourself to learn more, to ask the right questions, to get the best people, the best people in your teams. I always said, I mean, when I was introducing myself throughout my career, I had there's a very old movie called Space Jam, which was Michael Jordan with the monsters playing basketball. So for me, it was all about, I could feel that I am the Michael Jordan in my career, but I need to have players in my team that are much bigger than me and that can crush me because of their experience, their way of working, their attitude, their skills that I don't have. So that complementarity comes with a high sense of self-confidence, and ambition, which is what I said before. And when you have that combination, I think that no one can stop you, professionally speaking. At least for me, it has worked, and I can feel proud of that.
What a story. Love the loaded gun one. Final question from me, Pierluigi, and you've already shared a lot. On top of all that you said, if you were to think back of something that took you a while to understand and you wish you had learned faster and you haven't shared already, what would that thing be?
The sense of distancing myself from problems, putting things in perspective, have that sense of equanimity, which means whatever problem I have today is not going to be permanent. It's going to come and go. And enjoying life much more in the sense of a very difficult, tense moment in my life. I always took things very seriously. And life is, it's beautiful enough not to take everything so seriously. So right now, I'm having situations where I do see that my input in a board, my eagerness to get something done, doesn't necessarily land in the management team. And I say, fine. I mean, I'm not going to take it personally. This is obviously the way things need to happen. In Buddhism, there is a destiny that is called Dhamma, which means things need to happen naturally because that's the way they are supposed to happen. So if I put great effort and I don't see necessarily instant returns or appreciation for the work that I do, I just take it as it is. And I would say if I could go back in my career, whether it was in my days in Nestle in Mexico, whether it was in my days in Switzerland or with Unilever in the roles that I had, even with Dole lately, I would say, fine, things are not turning out the way I would like to, but life can be enjoyed anyway. And they need to happen because they need to happen that way. And so having that level of engagement, but also the right balance and distance to what you do is absolutely an important thing to achieve in life because it makes you certainly far more equanimous, balanced, happy, and actually people see that you are a cool professional, that you are not necessarily dying because of something that was said on a board that you didn't like or things are not turning out the way you like to. So in my view, that's the step where I am right now. I mean, nothing is permanent, as Buddha said. And I think in that sense, if they don't happen the way you would like to, it's because that's the way it needs to be. And again, you just observe, you let it pass, and you realize that life is beautiful anyway. And that's what makes you younger for a long time, even until your last day.
So cool. Well, lots of nuggets, Pierluigi. It's been a delight as always. Thanks for all these amazing analogies, examples, and really loads and loads of open life lessons. It's been a delight, as I said at the beginning of the conversation. Wonderful to have you again, and keep being you and keep inspiring others.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Radu. Let's keep in touch.
Once again, this is Radu Palamariu. Thank you so much for listening to this Leaders in Supply Chain podcast episode. If you're listening it on iTunes, Spotify, or any other channel, we'd love if you leave us a review. And of course, share this with anyone you think might enjoy it. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.